Let's get a check now of the top business news stories. We're joined by our business editor, Kate Moody. Kate, as the United States reports record numbers of coronavirus cases and hospitalizations, more Americans are being put out of work. What's the latest?
Well, Tom, we've seen these weekly jobless numbers climbing for the past month or so. Last week, 885,000 new applications for unemployment benefits were filed across the country. It's the highest level since Labor Day, early September, and it is even higher than economists had predicted for last week. This data don't take into account the large numbers of Americans who've just stopped looking for work altogether. It does, though, tie in with what we've been hearing from economists for several months now and from the head of the U.S. Federal Reserve just yesterday. Unemployment is likely to remain elevated for quite some time to come. There has been some recovery since a peak of layoffs back in March, but the labor market is going to remain weak until vaccines are distributed widely or the pandemic is really brought under control. Over 20 million Americans are currently receiving some kind of unemployment benefits. More than half of those, about 12 million people, are thought that they could lose all of that financial aid at the end of this month in just 2 weeks' time if Congress doesn't agree to extend some of the emergency support programs that it brought in earlier this year. That included more generous unemployment coverage and eligibility for self-employed and independent and gig economy workers.
And meanwhile, US lawmakers are still hashing out the final details of another round of stimulus funds. The clock's really ticking here, Kate.
Yeah, because we've got this December 31st deadline when some of those emergency programs are going to run out. Congress has been haggling over the details for several months, although we've seen more signs of progress now in December and in recent days. There is now growing bipartisan support for a package which would total around $900 billion. It's closer to the $500 billion proposal that was put out by Republicans rather than the $2.4 trillion package, which had initially been proposed by Democrats. What we know about this legislation, which has yet to be published, is that it's likely to include an extension of some of those key unemployment benefits, including enhancing them by about an extra $300 per week. It would include direct stimulus checks to struggling families, and it would include funding for the distribution of the coronavirus vaccine. Those are just a few of the major points that we understand will be included. Two of the most contentious issues that continue to divide lawmakers, largely along party lines, are out of what we understand is being drafted here. That would include additional aid for state and local governments, which is something that Democrats have pushed for, and liability protection for businesses, which is a priority for Republicans. So that's what we know seems to be emerging about this relief package being negotiated there. We know that the incoming Biden administration is already coming up with a bigger stimulus bill, which it hopes to roll out for 2021 and beyond. We do understand that the Trump White House isn't really involved in this latest round of negotiations. The outgoing president had threatened to block previous proposals of stimulus aid, but since the Electoral College confirmed and top Republicans acknowledged Biden's win just this Monday, the outgoing president does seem to have pulled back on these negotiations a little bit. And so we are starting to see some glimmers of hope, really, on both sides of the aisle this evening.
Again, as if all of that wasn't complicated enough, Congress needs to approve a government spending plan for next year, or else the government could shut down at midnight on Friday.
Yeah, we've talked so much about lockdowns this year, but this is the government shutdown rearing its ugly head again. There have been 3 major government shutdowns over the last decade. 2 of them have come under Donald Trump's administration, including one that lasted for 35 days. The deadline to approve next year's government spending plans is midnight this Friday. That deadline could be pushed back a few more days with another short-term spending bill, as indeed it was last week. A longer-term spending bill, though, does need to be approved. It's been blocked by disputes on a number of policy issues, most of them related to immigration. That budget vote is likely to be coupled with coronavirus relief funding that is so desperately needed across the United States by both households and businesses. Lawmakers do seem relatively confident that they'll be able to reach a deal, albeit, of course, at the 11th hour.
OK, well, thank you very much indeed for bringing us up to speed. Our business editor, Kate Moody. Thank you so much.